honourable member for Goldstein.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. And Deputy Speaker, yet another erudite speech — wait, no, that's the wrong word — empty speech from the member for Whitlam on superannuation. And of course, we have this almost every day. In fact, I think this is the second, maybe the third time where he comes into this chamber and shadow boxes, and dodges and punches these key arguments that nobody's actually making. He doesn't actually deal with the fundamental issues, which is, no matter what the member for Whitlam thinks, we can all see what is going on right here, right now. Once upon a time, the Australian Labor Party was the party of the worker. They recognised that Australians wanted to work, earn a good day's income, support their family, own their home, and recognise, yes, that they also want dignity and safety in retirement. That was when they represented organised workers. They did. A long, long time ago. Because what the Australian Labor Party today has become is the party of organised capital. Because what they seek, day in, day out, is an ever-increasing volume of Australians' incomes to go into funds managed by their mates, so they can use it to achieve undemocratic means, using the superannuation system for things they could never get through this chamber and the other place. That is what they are. They are not the party of the organised worker, they are the party of organised capital. They are going to trade the invisible hand for the shadow fist of the trade union movement and their political objectives. That's what this is all about. It's not a debate about Australian retirees, because truthfully, they don't care about them. They don't care about Australian workers. They'd literally rather take more money out of the hip pockets of Australians today when they desperately need them and funnel it into the funds of their mates than improve the material conditions of Australian workers right now. I don't think this is bad. I think this is scandalous. I think it's the most outrageous thing I've ever seen in public policy. And they do it coming in this chamber with crocodile tears as they stab the people in the back that they claim they're representing. And they do so on the basis of a dishonest argument from the outset. The dishonest argument is the most important thing for retirement security is the size of your superannuation balance. It is not. The most important thing for your retirement security is to own your own home. Yet we turn around the priorities of this country and the legislation that they will consistently support and will attack vehemently, much more than if you ever criticise the unions these days, is to keep in place an entrenched system where the priority for young Australians, people who are only 20 years old, is to save for the compound benefits of something that's not going to happen for another 50 years, at the expense of them having that income to save for a home that they'll get benefits for more than 50 years. This is scandalous and a complete reprioritisation of human need for their political interests. And what happens? Australian incomes, 10% of their incomes or nearly, goes out of the hip pockets of Australians into the funds that they support. And where do the donations end up? But in the hands of the Australian Labor Party. It is a form of political money laundering. And that is the basis of their political objectives on this issue. And so once again we have had this silly amendment because the member for Whitlam, like the member for McMahon and all those on the other side, go on rabbiting about how they care so much about Australian retiree security. Yet in this chamber, the member McMahon will experience this. I know he had a go at me in the previous speech. I know his policy on franking credits. We exposed his policy on the retiree tax, and I know that burns still to this day because you can hear it in the snark in his voice. Because in the end, they went to the last election saying, we are going to push Australian retirees below the poverty line. And they have the gumption to come into this chamber and then lecture people on this side about how they care about retiree security. And no matter how much we point out to them that they would have their retiree tax would smash the livelihoods of people who are independent, many people with sicknesses or had disabilities or were low-income earners, and particularly women. It didn't matter what we said. It didn't matter what Australians said. They wouldn't listen. They sat there arrogantly on the other side of the chamber and lectured us because they knew better, because this is their mad ideology. But the good news is the people of Australia had their say and exposed the empty policy they put then, like they would expose the empty policy that they put now. Because there are so many bodies that have looked into the economic consequences of what happens with superannuation if you keep increasing the compulsory contribution. The Australian Council of Social Services, this will hurt low-income earners. It'll make it harder for them to get a job. Oh, that doesn't matter. It's Labor Party who's the priority here. The Treasury says this will cost wages and wage growth. They go, oh, that doesn't matter, because we've got to get that money into our friendly funds. You have the Grattan Institute, who's looked at long-term impacts of enterprise bargaining agreements and the impact on wages, and come up with exactly the same conclusion. But that's fine, because if we didn't do this, the Labor Party would lose cash flow. And of course, you had the Reserve Bank of Australia appearing before the House Economics Committee meeting. And the Reserve Bank Governor drew an explicit correlation between increasing the compulsory super guarantee and slower wage growth. And then went on and drew a broader correlation between that and jobs. And let's face it, Deputy Speaker, if there is anything at this time, at the recession caused by the coronavirus, that is going to be critical for young Australians, for families, frankly for everybody, it's to create the job opportunities for the next generation of Australians. Because if you haven't got a job, you're not chipping into your superannuation account. But they don't care, because their only interest is themselves. And this is why we have to stand up on this issue, because they would trade the future opportunity of young Australians for themselves. They would force them to continue to lose the opportunity to own their own home, to feed their own interests. And where does the money go? Into funds where you fester on the fees and make donations to the Australian Labor Party. It is a scandal. And if you want to know just how much of a scandal it is, you just need to go and look at the answers from Industry Super Australia themselves. In questions to the Economics Committee, we got research that they wouldn't publish otherwise, that they wanted to keep secret. And it only reinforced what everybody else was saying, while they turned up in other public squares and said the opposite. This is the mad ideology that sits behind the Labor Party today, the party of organised capital. Because they don't prioritise the interests of Australians and how they want to pursue their life, their opportunity, their aspiration, and yes, their retirement security. And I keep making the point, Deputy Speaker, it's so important. It is madness that we turn around to a 20-year-old and say, you must save for your retirement in 50 years' time at the expense of owning your own home earlier, so that you can have more than 50 years of ownership and security that comes with it. Because the people who do worst in retirement are not people with lower superannuation balances. It is people who rent, because they face ever-increasing rents as time goes on. Yes, there's also a correlation often to having a low super balance, that's true. But they are the people, and they are the ones who are shown the most contempt by the people sitting on the other side of this chamber. I get passionate about this issue, Deputy Speaker, because I can see the rort that sits at the heart of it. And for the member of Whitlam come in here constantly and rant and rave in defence and say he's standing up for workers when he's doing the exact opposite, where he's facilitating a system that feeds his friends and at the expense of small business and at the expense of the worker and at the expense of their retirement security, I find truly extraordinary. Because we ultimately have to stand up on this one. Because we want to create the jobs on this side of the chamber so young Australians have a go. So they can have a go. So they can have some chance at getting their go. But we don't hear that from the other side. And you hear it in their sneers towards those Australians who, in a time of crisis, were given the opportunity to be reunited with their own money by this government. And their answer, they come in here and they always say, oh, we voted for it. I can tell you, go back and review the speeches on the day, Deputy Speaker. They did so very reluctantly because they knew they'd be exposed if they didn't. And they continue to come back in public and in this chamber and oppose it rhetorically. There's a sneer at the heart because in the end they would rather the money stayed with their fundy mates than let Australians keep their own homes. I heard in question time today, the Leader of the Opposition, who said, oh, yeah, so it's supposed to be used towards mortgages. Yes, if it's the choice between people losing their homes and drawing down early on their superannuation balance, I'd support them drawing down the super balance if they wish. Because the material impact, the long-term impact, the societal destruction, the family destruction they can have from the alternative is so much greater. We're all going to face choices during this recession, Deputy Speaker. We're all going to face choices when we come into this chamber and decide, do we want to build an Australia for future generations or not? And that's not the priority that sits at the heart of the Labor Party today. I can give you one guarantee, that is absolutely square focus of what I stand for, Deputy Speaker. I want young Australians to have their go too. And I don't want it taken from them by the Labor Party so they can feed themselves. Now's the time to stand up and to call out the empty rhetoric and the empty logic of those that sit on the other side of this chamber. Thank you.